Hi, we're taking a historic photographic journey around the town of Shrewsbury with author Michael Perna Jr. And a lot of people know Michael from town, and he's got 5 books out that I know of. 5? And I have 4 of them, but I'll have to get the 5th one. And I found it fascinating because when I looked at a lot of the pictures, I actually forgot that the buildings were, for example, the pastrami shack was whatever, Buffalo Bill's or something, Barbecue Bill's.
Barbecue Bill's first.
And then now it's Brody's, so everybody knows it as Brody's, but most of my memory was the pastrami shack.
It was there for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with his most recent book, and it's called Shrewsbury Through Time II. And clearly there's a number 1. So when I looked at the beginning of this book, the first thing I saw was White City Theater. And it fascinated me to think back to the movies that came out and how exciting it was when we first had the movie theater in town. And Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music and Funny Girl, they all stayed there for months and years.
That's right.
So as we hoped to see all sorts of movies in town, we had to wait and wait because there were such successful movies there that stayed forever. But that was a grand theater when it was first opened.
That was one of my first jobs as an usher there. And they gave you uniforms to wear, and you would just kind of show people with a flashlight where to sit. But they weren't particular about the uniforms. So sometimes the pants were up to here, or the sleeves were up to there. It's just whatever uniform came along. And I believe it was $1 an hour.
Just like babysitting.
Right.
And so White City Theater now is known as Bugaboo Creek.
No, Jimmy's Tavern.
But it what
was Bugaboo Creek.
Bugaboo Creek, and then Jimmy's.
Yes.
So it's amazing how things change. And actually, White City Theater is on the grounds of where White City, the amusement park, was.
That's right.
And you have a variety of pictures about, I'm not sure if it's in this book or one of the other books, but about White City and some of the rides that were there.
Oh, sure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the rides that went over the lake? And
well, probably the most, the one that's remembered the most is the rocket ship ride that had rocket ships that you would sit in, and then it would go faster and faster, and they would swing out farther and farther and go out over the lake as it went around. But back in those days, they didn't know what real rockets looked like in the early days of the park. So both ends of the rockets were pointy. There were no engines. Later on, they changed them, so there was an engine on one end, pointy on the other. Of course, the roller coaster was a very prominent part of that.
the fun house.
The fun house. There was a place called King Dodos Palace that we're not sure what was in there. The White City went through a number of different configurations, starting in 1905 up until the 20s, and they changed it. They had the Shoot the Chutes ride, that kind of like the log flume ride at up in New Hampshire there, whatever that.
Canopy Lake Park.
Yes.
And then you had to be a certain age to go on the bags that you rode down on the slide.
Oh, the
what was that called?
Yes, in the fun house they had
Potato sacks.
potato sacks.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was an age limit on that. I remember
Well,
that.
at least I was told there was because I was still young at the time.
Then at the bottom of that, they had the spinning wheel, where you sat on that, and one person could put their thumb. There was a hole in the middle. There was a big wheel, and it would spin faster and faster till it spun everybody off there. We do have one picture of that. Luckily, a local family took some photos back in the 20s or 30s, and it included one picture of that in there. Other than that, there are no photos.
And I don't know if you're, but Duddy used to guess people's weights
That's how we started
down
out.
at the amusement park.
Yep.
He was the weight guesser. And so that was his beginning. And Miss White City, we can't forget Miss White City.
That's where the photo of the interior of the funhouse came from, was Miss White City's family, who lived down by Jordan Pond. And I lived down by there and actually knew one of her sisters until, well, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, something like that. Time goes by.
And the White City Park was probably one of the last main activity centers on the lake that brought people to the lake. I mean, there were many, many private clubs along the lake.
Right.
Where now they're all private homes, but there were private clubs along the way. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, the White City, when it opened in 1905, was probably what you'd call a cutting-edge amusement park, as opposed to Lincoln Park on the Worcester shore, which was opened just after the Civil War, so it wasn't quite as sophisticated. But then the White City eventually, as people got more mobile with owning their own cars and so on, kind of died out little by little. But the social clubs, there were so many of them down there, and today there's still a couple. They've kind of transformed into other organizations, but the oldest existing club building on the lake is now, up until recently, the Knights of Columbus building. It was a Lithuanian War veterans, but that goes back to about 1866.
The Lithuanian War veterans?
Right.
Because I remember them from when we were in grammar school. And they had a band. They were always well represented with a band. So the other interesting, there was so much activity on the lake that now if you're on the lake on a boat, you're lucky to be there. But you don't have locations where people are just drawn to the lake to gather, and whether in groups or whatever. There's not an opportunity to just go down to the lake and enjoy the water unless you know someone who owns property.
That's primarily true, other than the Worcester side has Quinsigamond State Park and Regatta Point. On our side, we still have Sunset Beach.
Yes.
Years ago, we had Tatasset Beach. And there were a few places I can remember, the Svegilly
Svegilly.
at the end of Oak Street. It's now condos. Then it became the AOH, Ancient Order of Hibernians, then the Quack Club. Well, as kids, we'd run up the street, go down the stairs behind the building, and jump in the water off their wharf. But today, you can't do things like that.
No, and we used to sneak and swim at the boathouse, and you can't
At
do
the
that either.
boathouse, too. That's right.
And we were lucky enough not to get caught.
Right.
So, but when I look at the pictures, there's so many pictures in all of your books of showing the lake and showing different parts of the lake. So you have pictures of old Regatta Point, or original Regatta Point, as we could describe it, and the current one. And it's really not much different.
Not a lot, no, other than there was the ladies' bathhouse there
Oh, yeah.
years ago. And over the course of years, I've been fortunate to talk to people, older people, that most of them are gone now, but that remember growing up around there, and including one family, both the husband and the wife, who grew up there. And they said what would happen is the ladies would be in the bathhouse, and the young guys would swim over there from the bridge and kind of try and look underneath there and see what they would see.
So that was the end of the bathhouse.
Right.
But there was a police station over there.
The police station on North Lake Ave.
On the Worcester side.
Right.
And you have pictures showing a state police location on Route 9 with horses.
Yes.
From years back. What can you tell us about that?
Well, up until 1930, there was no Route 9. It was the Boston and Worcester Turnpike that was put in the early 1800s, but it was just a dirt road for stage coaches. In 1930, they built Route 9, they built Route 20, and then things started to develop with restaurants or, motels or things like that. But the picture with the state police on the horseback, they were, for whatever reason, coming towards Worcester from the Boston area and happened to stop there, and they took a photo of them right near Walnut Street, where the Christmas tree shop is today. And the feeling we're getting, right across the street, the LeBeau family owned a place called the Moosehead Cafe that opened when Route 9 was built. So we're feeling that maybe they stopped there for lunch or something, and then they took the photo of them on horseback.
That's interesting. And you also have pictures of Route 9 when it was a dirt road and very, very narrow. And then you have pictures of present-day Route 9, comparing it to that, and it's amazing. It'd be difficult if you randomly showed us those pictures for us to say, oh, I know where that is, because it just looks so different.
What happened was this guy I've gotten to know, Frank Morrill, who does similar type historical research that I do here, but for Sutton and areas down there, got a whole box full of negatives. He collected glass plate negatives way back, but then these are regular negatives, and he didn't know they were all of Shrewsbury. They were all labeled with the date they were taken and the property owner's name of a house or business. And he said, what is this? Why did they do that? So he let me look at them and sent me like digital copies of them. I said, you know what this is? This is when they were going to build Route 9. They went around, took photos of every house or business or building from the Lake Bridge all the way to the Northborough line, in case they were going to use eminent domain to take some property. In some cases, they moved houses or buildings back. And that's what that was.
Oh.
So that's where we're getting the then photos and then the now photos.
So we're lucky to have that historical perspective now. So we're sitting in the library right now, and we're in one of the original rooms. And it's a beautiful room, as the whole library's beautiful, but to be in the old part and to still have it feel so wonderful, we're pretty lucky for that. But in one of the pictures you have here, it shows the center school.
Okay.
Which some of our friends went to the center school. You went to the center school. And then all of a sudden, one day, it was demolished and gone forever. Now, it was probably falling down.
No, it's still in pretty good shape. Well, what happened was the population of the town was getting bigger. There were more students than they could handle. What's now the Sherwood Middle School, where one of my grandsons goes, wasn't built yet. So they took some students from each of the grammar schools. I was in Coolidge, and some from Patton or North Shore, and put us all together at the center school, which was built in 1883, I believe. And that was the first time we got to meet anybody from any other neighborhood, kind of.
And it was fun.
That was for 6th grade. And from there, then they shipped us down to Ward School for a year or two, then up to what was the high school on Oak Street, but we were kind of down in the lower wing until we got into the high school grades. But shortly after that, they knocked it down. And
the middle school was built by it wasn't called the middle school.
It was called the junior high.
And I happened to be in one of the first classes at the junior high.
There you go.
And to think that it was a brand new school built, and now it's just totally gone, and a whole new building is in that location. Time really passes.
It sure does.
And it was more cost effective to knock that building down and to rebuild on that property, and that's why that decision was made. But I think of Beale School and the history that's in that building, but yet it's possible that that building could be knocked down too.
The plan is the new one's going up, and just today they sent out a notice that they're going to have a topping off ceremony where they can sign the beam, the steel beam and so on. They're going to try and preserve some of the artifacts from Beale School, including the name up over the entrance, the bas relief, the World War I bas relief inside the front entrance, and preserve the name, like Nee Hall. Private Nee was the youngest Shrewsbury resident to be killed in action. In what was the gym or hall over here was Nee Hall. So they're going to preserve that at the new school and have a historical display in the front entry. So that's a good way to preserve that.
And in the front of Beale School is the newly rebuilt memorial.
World War I memorial.
World War I memorial. And someone at one of the meetings spoke about it could be moved down. And I think that would be met with a lot of protest if it were to be moved from the location that it's in.
I hadn't heard that, but I would agree with you, yeah.
Because it's almost like sacred ground being there, just as the monument right at the center.
The Civil War monument.
The Civil War monument, and you have pictures of that.
Other ones.
And when I looked at the pictures of the Civil War monument with the men in front and then the current day picture, it just gives a warm feeling, and it always brings us back to Memorial Day and the feeling of all of the people being gathered in that area. So you covered that well. And also the picture of where Senator Bar used to be, which is now called the corner.
Willie's Steakhouse.
Willie's Steakhouse.
Underneath there.
And that whole strip that was Hale's Drugstore. When I was young, my memory of Hale's Drugstore was that it was this huge building. And I mean, if you think of how CVS and Walgreens is such a big building today, and you look at the old pictures and you look at the current building, Hale's couldn't have been quite as big as I thought, but it just seemed to be so enormous. But that picture shows Senator Bar and the extension with Hale's. And then what was just beyond Hale's? Wasn't there where the bank is now? Was that where the library was?
Oh, the first library building actually was down the street from us here.
Oh, I went in the wrong direction.
But then they moved it
Oh,
up there to where the parking lot is.
before it came here.
Right. And it became a restaurant called Alcaro's. Prior to that, I believe it was a private residence. It became Alcaro's Italian restaurant, and then it burned.
Oh.
But
There were a lot of fires in your book. It seems like there were a lot of fires.
Yes, almost all of the original club buildings on the lake burned for whatever reason, arson or negligence or who knows what, including a lot of the White City buildings. At one point, the Bigelow family had a mansion right about where Shaw's is now.
Oh.
And it was like 20-something rooms, had all kinds of engraved paneling and so on. And they planned to expand the park. The Bigelow family had kind of passed away there. The building was vacant. And right before they were going to knock it down, it burned in a huge fire.
Wow.
But the dance hall burned. A lot of the buildings after the park closed burned.
Just strange.
Just very odd.
Probably today we'd call it suspicious.
Right.
Now, you mentioned the Bigelow family. There was a lot of property along the lake that was owned by the Bigelow family.
Yes. And just now that you mention it, just within the past few months, while I was still finishing up this book, I got a huge collection of photos from the Bigelow family, dating back to around the turn of the century, 1900, up until maybe the 20s or 30s. All the things around the lake, elephants swimming in the lake, the steamboats, all the various clubs, the original employees at the White City and things like that, which is a huge, huge addition to the history of the town. But the Bigelows developed. H.H. Bigelow, Horace Hawley Bigelow, was a wealthy industrialist, made his money in the shoe business, starting in the Civil War era, then came to Worcester from Marlborough and decided to create this amusement area as a tourist attraction at the lake, just for the common people to come and enjoy themselves. and that's what he did. And he also developed the steamboats. There was a horse racing track in Edgemere that he had something to do with. And then over where Quinsigamond State Park is, on Lake Ave, him and someone named Davis offered all that land to the city of Worcester to be used as a park, and they said, we don't want it.
That sounded like Shrewsbury with the Brewer Estate.
Right. But then a number of years later, they offered it again, and they said, okay, we'll take it. And so that's where the park came from. Until recent years, if you remember, at the corner of Coburn Ave and Hamilton Street, there was a tower there, stone
Yes.
tower. That was a Davis Tower.
Oh,
And that was Mr. Davis that offered the land.
well,
with him.
when you talk about that, that road is now, before you, it used to be assumed to be Hamilton Street, and now it's called Bigelow Davis Parkway.
I believe
which
so.
is from Lake Ave just to the top of the hill.
Right. And that's why.
But interestingly enough, you have a picture in here of Shrewsbury property, which is on the Worcester side of the lake.
Oh, the front cover of the book.
Okay.
Okay? If you look at that, right here is Lake Ave.
Wow,
Okay?
that's amazing. We're going to run out of time, and I just need to cover a few things quickly. So you have pictures in here of Howard Johnson's. You have pictures in here of Spags and Orlando's and the Tudor Motel, which is now
Patrick Motors.
Patrick Motors, but in between it was Shrewsbury Motor Inn.
Yes.
No, it was Shrewsbury Motor Inn before it was the Tudor, whatever.
Yes.
And you have pictures of Turnpike Pharmacy, which we all knew as Arthur's.
Arthur
You didn't
Keller.
say, I'm going to Turnpike Pharmacy. You either went to Frank's or Arthur's. Frank Rossetti or Arthur.
Yeah.
And so you have pictures of that. You have pictures of Tatasset Beach. And you mentioned Felix Pilot, who is what? What's he famous for?
Well, he was the owner of Tatasset Beach. He bought it in 1928 from the Tatasset Canoe Club. His nephew lived in the Bronx, and the family was worried that he would never amount to anything because all he wanted to do was doodle. So in the summer, they sent him up to Uncle Felix to impart some business sense to him. He worked at the snack bar at Tatasset Beach, but all he wanted to do was draw pictures of the girls on the beach. A couple of years later, he created two characters, Batman and Robin, that assured his future. The family didn't have to worry about his income or anything else after that.
Interesting, all from Shrewsbury. Now, there's a picture in here of the original Orlando's Market, which then became the biggest store, which is now Sprint and whatever else is in that building now. But I was describing this to my mother, who is now 96, and she was talking about how Merrill Cleaners used to be in the building where Orlando's Market originally was, and she talked about how Gladys Mazzari had a card shop in there.
That I didn't know.
And she said it was before 1948. That's how she remembers it was. But Gladys Mazzari had a card shop in there. And then she talked about J. Baker's, which was on the other side. It was a shoe
Where the
store.
bank is.
Where the bank is, next to Orlando's.
Yep.
And then she talked about Tony Rossi's greenhouse across from the Mazzari house, which was on Edgewater Ave, which is right behind the jewelry store that's there now.
Okay.
So she got going on a lot of history that she had never talked about before. You have pictures of Harlow School, which if you talk to the students that went to Henry Harlow, they called it Henry Harlow. They didn't call it the Harlow School. Just like Coolidge School was Calvin Coolidge. So you've got pictures of both of those schools. You also have Frosty's, which was Dairy Queen, which is now CVS.
Yes.
Sadly, in my mind, the Dean Park flag got moved, which, not that it shouldn't be in the location it's in now, but that I wonder what's going to happen to that hill. It shouldn't just blend away into the trees. It should still remain something to us. You have pictures of Town Diner, which was Village Pizza. I got a kick out of the one you have here, the house on Maple Ave where all the teachers lived, the female teachers.
Oh, yes.
Because they had to be single, they couldn't be married.
That's correct.
I don't know why.
Times change.
And then one tower that I was always very curious about on South Quinsigamon Ave is the house where the water, it was how they pumped the water.
It was a type of windmill that they used the wind power to pump the water up from the lake into these tanks that were in the tower, and then they would sell the water to the local households. That's before there was town water.
And that tower still remains.
The tower is still there.
They made it part of the house. So that's interesting. You have pictures, I know we're running short on time, so I'm not sure. I just want to get through this. It was where Two Frans, which was Tudor Arizzi and Frank Vera,
Yes.
had a restaurant,
Right.
which was right next to Orlando's also.
That later became J. Baker's.
J. Baker's.
But it was only there for a couple of years.
They probably didn't have fun working in the restaurant business. It's a hard business.
Well,
It'd be interesting to hear their stories. You have so many pictures of around White City intersection, the North and South Quinsigamon Ave intersection, and you have pictures that bring back lots of thoughts and memories around there. As I was describing some of this to my mother, once again, she talked about Snuffy's Donuts. Did you ever hear of Snuffy's Donuts?
I've heard of it, but I'm not sure where it was.
It was between Matero's Bakery and Ivino's.
Okay.
And
That rings a bell
Matero's
now.
Bakery and Ivino's is now where Trader Joe's is.
The entrance to the plaza and so on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and you had the two barber shops. You had John the Barber and you had Joe the Barber. So you have pictures of Joe the Barber's in here. And this Coranta Post. It was so sad to see the Coranta Post go because there was so much, which is now where Town Fair Tire is. There was so many family activities at the Coranta Post, and lots of veterans would get together. We're running out of time, but this book is filled with memories. There are so many things in here. There's pictures of St. Teresa's, which was the church before St. Mary's was built, and St. Anne's. There's just so much in this. And it brought me back to the books that I already had from Michael. And there's just so much in here that brings back so many memories. And so you've given a lot of us residents a great gift. So for that, I'd like to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Is there-
One thing I did want to mention, this latest book, I did have my grandchildren help me. It's a then and now format, so we went around town, they had their iPads, and they were taking the now photos of all the various buildings
Wow.
or structures. And then I had them, you have to supply like 5 proposed cover photos, so I had them vote on the cover photos. And surprisingly, 3 out of the 4, they range from now age 14 to 8. 3 out of the 4 picked the same #1 photo.
That's amazing.
Yep. So they were excited about that. And they also helped, the older 2 help transcribe some of the
Well, thank you
Captions.
for this wonderful gift for all of us in Shrewsbury and anyone else who's interested in our town. So if I were you, I highly recommend getting these books. Thanks for watching.